Hi gang, on the Joy of Football today, 4 segments, starting with We Need to Talk About, and we're talking about early Premier League performances. Liverpool, Villa, Sunderland, Manchester City, Palace, Tottenham.
We also need to talk about Europe, with 6 clubs in the Champions League setting off on that adventure, and how England could do perhaps better than the last couple of years.
Letter from the Gantry. Martin's letter from the Gantry is about that scorpion kick.
And we have the voice of passion, subtitled No Nonsense Neil.
And don't forget, if you want to get close to us, go and look at the Patreon. If you want to read us, you can go to substack.com, where the Joy of Football has Martin's letters in writing and my musings. And if you want to just enjoy us, subscribe.
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for a shot in! René Higuita!
The Joy of Football.
Hello, the Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett, comes from Martin's kitchen today. We're in the middle of the international break as we record this. I've just toddled off to Cornwall for a few days break, and Martin's seen Woking win 5-0.
I have, wonderful. And played, the goals are all available on YouTube. Watch them and you'll see the high quality of the goals, but the team worked so hard. I think that's really where the players have stepped up. First home win of the season, and what a win.
The international break gives us a chance to look back at the opening 3 games of the Premier League season, and here we go with We Need to Talk About. Martin, we need to talk about Liverpool, maximum points. The only team with maximum points after 3 games. Have they played that well?
Well enough, Neil. I know what you're sort of hinting at, and really, looking at Liverpool last season, people were saying, well, maybe the 1988 Liverpool team or Klopp's Liverpool team, and going even further back to the great days of Shankly's teams. But it's a winning machine. You know, the joke about a slot machine, I think it was funny at the beginning, but it was absolutely appropriate all the way through. And I think it's still like that. And obviously they've really gone into bat in the transfer market. Although not getting Marc Guehi would have been a disappointment. It seemed so close that it would have suited every party but Crystal Palace. Whether that will come back to be a problem in the course of the season, but they're scoring goals, and they're scoring late goals. Yeah. Most importantly,
no,
they always have done. I mean, it's even before we had 10 minutes of added time. It was, and even before I used to shout out, the Premier League is the league of late goals. Even before the Premier League, they scored lots of late goals. The Kop end, we always used to say, suck the ball into the net for the crucial goal at the end. And they've always been a team that's been full on from first whistle to last ever since. I mean, say forever, but certainly in the time that I've been involved, it's a long time. They've always been a team where, you know, as a commentator, you have to keep fully focused, and the opposition, if they're not fully focused, they usually pay a price for it. So, but I'm going to touch on it in the letter. There haven't been a lot of goals scored so far in these 3 rounds of matches, but they're getting, what, they got 8 or something like that in their 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I keep saying about this, I think the fittest teams and the best athletes are the ones who win games late on more regularly, and Liverpool are clearly that. And I think they're wonderful athletes, unfortunately.
But the game that we were, obviously the most recent game, the game against Arsenal, it wasn't an athletic pursuit, was it? It was the most wonderful free kick from Dom Szoboszlai.
Although it was won by a late wave of attacks.
Yeah, I agree. I give you that, and that's something that perhaps it was 0-0 for a long time. It looked very much like a 0-0 game, didn't it? I mean, Arsenal, they were very good. I thought both teams without the ball were really good, and so it was going to take something, either a bad mistake or something very special, and we got the very special end of it, and Liverpool did.
Well, you say they were very good at defending. I've been underwhelmed so far, and I'm a big fan, so I'm not dissing these players. But I've been underwhelmed this season with what I've seen of Kerkez at left back, and with Konate, who seems to be accident prone. Whether his end of contract coming up, I think it's the end of this season, isn't it? And the Guehi talk has affected him, I don't know. And then in the first game, Frimpong didn't have a good game, and Connor Bradley apparently isn't fit enough to start.
Well, he played for Northern Ireland over the games. They played over the weekend, so he's fit. And
they almost took Germany to a 1-1 draw. It was 3-1 in the end, wasn't it?
It was. But Connor played a big part in it, in his aggressive, very promising. He's going to be a very good player somewhere. But I would assume for Liverpool. But is he going to play there?
Yeah, he's early 20s now. He needs to be playing. He needs to be playing. But the thing is, Jabazai went there, and he looks born to the work. This is what I'm saying is, when they're not playing well, they've got a unity, they've got a team spirit, they've got a way of finding their path through games at the moment, which is positive, but they need to start playing well.
Well, if they play better and they keep winning, I mean, if they've got another gear or two to go, which is what you're suggesting, then beware the rest of the league. That's all I would say.
Yeah, I always think, though, when managers say, we're not getting the results, but I'm really optimistic because we've got the performance, I always say, well, what happens if you lose the performance before you get the results? That's just unintelligent.
But you're saying they're getting the results and not the performance.
Exactly.
So the performance will come.
Yeah.
And I do think the performance has been okay. And they are the target. I mean, that's always a difficult thing. Being successful is one thing. Sustaining that success is another. And obviously, when Jurgen Klopp's side won the league, they didn't win it the following year. Whether it's very, very hard. Manchester City have set an example that will be very hard for anybody to follow their first team in English history to win the league 4 times in a row. But you do tend to feel that something, a real empire around the football club is being built to have continued success. I think Liverpool have got a good chance of that happening, but as we say, I mean, we're going to, I'm sure, preface all of this really, and we're going to talk about other teams as well, that there is only 3 games, but the points you get at the beginning are very, very helpful as you move along, and it just reminds everybody that you are the champions, and Liverpool are doing that.
We need to talk about Aston Villa. No goals, 1 point.
Yeah, and no financial strength to get the squad up to scratch at the start of the season. I mean, Ezri Konsa, who of course had a red card, hasn't he, in his start to the season, but pointing out, I think quite viably, that the regulations now they're not helpful for teams who want to spend more money. They have more money in the resources, but it's not in an income stream. It's from the boardroom. And that's not allowed. And I know we're going to maybe talk about that a bit later on, but that's a real handicap for Villa. I did their last game last season when they failed to qualify for the Champions League, and the whole Emi Martinez thing was surfacing then because he got sent off in that game, and then he was going to leave. It seemed that it was certain that he was going to leave, but he's still there, and what that means financially, I don't know whether there's. We know he's a strong personality. I don't know whether there's any issues with that. These things happen sometimes, but I would have thought they'd be very relieved, the supporters and the outfield players, that they've still got him. So there's a big corner to be turned now.
Lack of goals. I mean, obviously, Rashford and Asensio have left from the second half of the season, but they went short of goals with Watkins and the other forward players. Morgan Rogers got his share. Not so much Bailey last season. Now he's gone out on loan. He's out in favour. But they were getting goals.
And from midfield, I mean, Tielemans will get goals, and Matty Cash, I think, has scored for both Poland games, hasn't he? So maybe he'll be coming back full of that buccaneering style that he has at right back. And when you do want 1 or 2 from your centre backs as well, that I think the teams that have done well, usually, obviously Virgil van Dijk at Liverpool contributes in that respect, and your own Chelsea team, you've got players who go up and head in corners. So it could just be a freak, but I think it's kind of not Unai Emery at all, is it? Really, to have a side that doesn't really. They're not playing with no passion or anything like that. It doesn't look as though there's a problem. Is it 3 games? Well, sometimes you look back at the season, they didn't win in their first 8 games or something like that. And when you look at the end of the season, you think, well, there must have been a reason, but it didn't matter. There might be a reason and it won't matter. But Villa have offered a lot the last couple of years. They've been a great watch. And I think from just the general love of football, joy of football point of view, we'd like to see them get a few goals.
Yeah, and the other thing I think with Villa, I think that the top sides can still play in the opposition half, play their possession football and defend on the halfway line. I think now a lot of teams are defending deeply and going longer this season over the back of defenders on the halfway line. And I'm not sure Villa's defenders are the type to cope with that. And I think they're getting caught in the counter-attack an awful lot, Villa, and looking vulnerable with balls through them or over the top of them. And I think obviously that was the way they finished up losing 3-0 at home to Crystal Palace. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe they've got to find a different way of possessing the ball and defending.
Well, I think Unai Emery has got a track record to suggest that he will he'll solve the problems. I think if you're a defender, you're entitled to go into the dressing room and say, well, you lost or drawn 0-0. What about you lot up front? And I think, it will happen. I mean, Ollie Watkins' track record tells you. There's been a lot of noise around Ollie Watkins, hasn't there? Where you think maybe he's not as happy at the club as he was in his early years, where he was a sensational signing and talks so well about the job of scoring goals. He's a really fascinating guy to listen to. Ollie, if you want to come on the Joy of Football podcast, we'd welcome you with open arms. But maybe there's a little bit of, he wasn't quite a regular at the end of last season for sure. Now it looks like they're going to lean on him heavily. So I hope I would imagine it's one of those, you have a run where you get a couple of chances, you don't score, and you've got to be single-minded and forget about it. It's what you always say. Just go on, the next one will come along, you'll get that. Don't worry. It's a lot in the mind of goal scorers, and they are different to the rest, like goalkeepers are as well. You have to have that mindset that never be afraid to miss. Worry if you're not getting any chances. That's the time to worry.
Moving on. We need to talk about Sunderland, 5th in the Championship, winners of the playoffs, 2 home games, 2 wins.
Yeah, outrageously, Bris. Suddenly stepping into the, I've got a Sunderland game coming up actually to commentate. I'm really looking forward to it. I've been doing a little bit of preliminary work on it, and he, in his previous managerial career, he was particularly good at the mental side of working with footballers and athletes generally. And I think that may well be having a factor, having a role in this particular excellent start. I mean, they did start, when he took over, they started like a house on fire. But it was a bit of a surprise that they got that playoff success. But amidst all the new players, and there are bags of them, there is a couple of standout. Granit Xhaka, of course, you would imagine, is a great organiser, both in the dressing room and on the pitch as well. And it's good to see him back in Premier League football. Simon Adingra came from Brighton, who brings Premier League. Because they've lost Guehi, haven't they?
Arthur Masuaku, who
was at West Ham, yeah.
Amazing. But they lost Joe Bellingham. They lost Tom Watson, who scored the goal, obviously, that got them promoted, and that probably brought in 50-odd million more. 60-odd million pounds.
So Guehi would have played regularly, I think, and now he's had to go back to Chelsea. Yeah. So that was a very short loan.
Yeah, one start in the Carabao Cup and a goal, and 2 substitute appearances. I mean, they're out of the Carabao Cup. They lost at home to Huddersfield, no less, of League One on penalties after a 1-1 draw. So it's not all been
Yeah, but there will be people saying, look, it's all about the Premier League. We don't need a cup run. I mean, goodness me, I'm old enough to remember their greatest day. When I was there at Wembley in 1973 when they, as a second tier team, they won the FA Cup, beating the all full international and pretty much all conquering Leeds United.
And they got back there in 1992 against
They did,
Liverpool.
yeah. And I still see the manager, Malcolm Crosby, is a friend. We've got a mutual friend, Alan Dowson, the manager I've worked with, and I seen Malcolm quite a lot. He was really helpful to me. I commentated on that final, and he gave me access, and we went. They stayed in Marlow, very nice part of the world to that. And I went over and saw them there. And Malcolm was very helpful, and he's one of the great characters around. Yeah, they've, I think now the new regime or newish regime, they've got this policy of getting young players in. They had that as a championship side. And you sort of think, oh yeah, maybe it'll work. If Chelsea can go, they can buy really at the top end of the market, where the Sunderland could, or where the one or two they'll get will come through. But now they've invested. I mean, it is really a new team and a new start. And as you say, two great results. And the goalkeeper saved the penalty against Brentford as well. So the new goalkeeper, Roos.
Where did they get him from?
I'm not sure where they got him from, but he was in the international squad, the Dutch squad, isn't he?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Roos they got from NEC.
Neck Brader, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think...
Raised the roofs when he saved the penalty.
I think there's a lot of nonsense talked about you need a bit of luck to win the Champions League. You need a bit of luck to win the FA Cup, the draw, everything else, Carabao Cup. You need a bit of luck to win the World Cup. I think you need a bit of luck to win the leagues, whatever anybody says. And one of the things that can help you, particularly if you're a promoted side, is to get 3 or 4 early home games that are winnable, that will get you points on the board, that will take the pressure off of looking over your shoulder and allow you to become a more expansive football team. And Sunderland's home start, if they get 4 home wins in their first 5-6 home games, and suddenly they've got 12 points from home, they're on their way. They're on their way to survival. Doesn't mean they will survive, but they're on their way, and they can believe in themselves and progress and develop in a way that maybe they couldn't if they only had 3 points from those.
Yeah, like Southampton, obviously, never really got that, did they? Never got that run going. But it's exciting. It's a great football place, great football city, Sunderland, and I'm looking forward to seeing them play. I'll be able to add a bit more to my thoughts on them. But good start, bright manager, different, coming in, not heralded at all. And sometimes that freshness counts for an awful lot. And it's not as though he's in a no-lose situation, because if they get relegated, of course, it will be on his head. But it's a big surprise that he's ahead of the game. He would have been brought in, so if you can get his promotion in 2 or 3 years, and he's done it pretty much straight away. So, excellent.
I've got Sunderland away, I think, on a Wednesday evening this season. So
I'll see you Friday then.
Just take my advice. Sunderland away, Wednesday evening, night out, Newcastle. We need to talk about Manchester City. 3 games, 2 defeats.
I think we sort of touched on the newness of it. I mean, the Sunderland newness with players who are really now, wide-eyed about the Premier League. I'm sure they are. Manchester City players, the new ones, some of them have got a lot of Premier League experience, like Ait Nouri. And others who come in where you expect them, obviously you expect Manchester City to sign players to hit the ground running. But it is a surprise that they haven't quite sorted out. I did think, I said on the last podcast, I saw them play in America in the Club World Cup, and it didn't look quite right, but they'd only just joined and they were spending, it was Big Joe, Bernardo Silva, spoke really intelligently about the situation, about how the tiredness was a big talk about that, but how they were being given time off. I think they were based somewhere in Florida maybe, and that they were allowed to go and sit in the sun. The joke was Erling Haaland couldn't sit in the sun because he's so fair-skinned, and when they played in the game that I did, he was a sub, he sat right at the back of the dugout in 100-degree temperatures in old money, and so that was kind of, and they were sort of like getting to know each other, and it hasn't quite translated into really being back as that fabulous footballing family that comes out of that dressing room at the Etihad and the away games, and you just expect them to win. Once you show signs of vulnerability, there's no worse place to be than in the Premier League, because they will be snapping at their heels, everybody they play now. So nothing lasts forever. You look at Pep as the absolute perfect person to sort out what difficulties have accrued. I think the team getting a bit older and the new players coming in, they're things you can talk about. I would say teething troubles, and most people, I think, in the game would say, well, if you finish above Manchester City, you've had a great season.
I think the season before last, in the second half of the season, they went on a run and won the league. The first half wasn't great. And the second half of the season was when De Bruyne came back from having missed the first half of the season. And every time I saw him, he was just the best player in the Premier League. Last season, he didn't really come back from his injuries, and they didn't prosper. Now he's gone. And I think because his leaving has been quite a long time in the happening in terms of running down through injury, I don't think people are talking about it enough. I think they have lost their greatest ever player, and I think it is very influential. And Rodri doesn't appear to be up to speed yet from his long injury, and they desperately need that. But the De Bruyne thing is one thing. But if I were to define Manchester City's style of play over the last 7-8 years, one player would define it, and that is Ederson. And he goes, and Donnarumma, who is, for me, Joe Hart resurrected. Joe Hart could catch the ball better than Donnarumma. I think Donnarumma and Courtois are probably the two best shot savers on the planet. But I don't think there's anything else in Donnarumma's game. He can't catch, he can't come for crosses, and his distribution is ropey. Or are we seeing Pep going down the new road?
Well, the route is there with Haaland, who'd love the ball much earlier than he gets it, I'm sure, and continues even in this start. He's missed a few, but he scores, and maybe the point you made earlier is something that's coming into Manchester City's game. The play forward is something that I think all football lovers want to see, and play forward quickly makes the game very exciting. But
the other player that I must bring up, I don't remember. I think Rodri may have won Man of the Match, Player of the Match when they won the Champions League final with his goal. The other player I'd like to talk about is, looking back at the 2023 Champions League final, which they won, of course, I think Rodri may have got Man of the Match for his goal. But for me, the player of the match was John Stones, who I think was nominally selected at right back. But he was the one going into midfield. And he didn't just go into holding midfield. He played like a number 8. He was a box-to-box all game. Inter Milan pressed and defended, but didn't really attack. So he had a lot of license. But his form that day was absolutely world-class. And he's hardly played since.
Well, he was going to play for England and in this international break as a midfield player. So that backs up your thoughts on him. Yeah, and John's a fine footballer and a man now of huge experience. But again, that's the aging thing, I guess. Bernardo Silva did say in Florida that this will be his last season. So that, maybe that's going to impact on however much you say, well, I'll give it absolutely everything. I'm sure he's saying that to himself, but subconsciously maybe it's not a great place to be in. So there are issues to be sorted out, but that's, I would have thought that Pep Guardiola, deep down, when you've done everything so well and won so many things, how much fun is it now to sort out and get another team together as well? I think, that when you sort of almost not starting from scratch, but you've got these elements, you've got new players, you've got your flexibility of moving players around in different positions in the team. I think that's such an exciting thing for a coach to have to do. And I'd love to have that conversation with him where you say, come on now, what now? It's not a blank sheet of paper, but you've got some elements that are strong, some elements that are new, and other elements that might be fading. How are you going to weld that into something to compete at the very highest level of not only English football, but European football as well? Exciting.
But are you optimistic for them?
Yeah, because it's Pep. I'm not, there will be other situations, the same situation at other clubs, maybe without the genius, really. And it's so much easier when you've got a side that come back next year, we'll do it all again, But it hasn't been like that. It's always been sign when you're winning. That's always been a good thing, and City have done that and kept it topped up. But maybe it's not quite topped up now, or one or two of the ingredients that's supposed to top it up have been a bit slow in bursting out into the full flourish of their ability. So I'm going to watch it with. I've got a Champions League game involving City in a couple of weeks, so I'm very interested to see how that goes and what it tells us about maybe the short, medium, and longer term future. I don't know how long it will be for Pep, but he has signed a new 2-year deal, didn't he? So he's always been an honourable man in that respect. So I'm sure that there's this year and next year. It'll be I'm not a Man City fan. I'm not a fan of any Premier League team, but I love them all because I just love watching the development. It's such a privilege to broadcast games at such a high level and see how these difficulties tactically, personality-wise, taking an individual into a team group, might have a language problem, or all these. They're great. I mean, no wonder people play their computer games about management, because it is an extraordinary. If you get it right, it's fulfilling. If you get it wrong, you get the sack.
Season of struggle. We need to talk about Crystal Palace, who for the third summer running have lost their best player, Wilfried Zaha, Michael Olise, Eberechi.
That's their best attacking player. That's what you're saying.
Yes, yeah. And they've gone 3 games undefeated.
Yeah, and they've kept to Marc Guehi, and whether that has repercussions, I don't know. Marc Guehi is one of the most responsible, mild-mannered, caring young footballers I've ever met. Deep religious principles, and any disappointment that he would have felt, and you're hearing conflicting reports about he was disappointed, he wasn't disappointed, now be a free transfer, might be better for him in the longer run. He will give Crystal Palace absolutely everything.
And he's said nothing publicly.
No, and he won't. And he's just, I suppose, a bit different from those who are inclined to let something slip. I don't think he'll really get asked a lot, won't he? He's captain after all. He's going to front up a lot, but he'll get asked, and I'm sure he'll come up with the right answer. A home-loving boy. Maybe there are some bonuses in not having to up sticks, but he went to Swansea and played, didn't he? So he must have lived away from home before. And worth the fuss. 1, because of the ability he has, but 2, because you're signing a rock-solid person as well.
I saw them on the first day of the season when they got a draw at Chelsea, and the 2 things that struck me, well, the first 2 things that struck me was their wing-backs. Munoz, who was my best right back in the Premier League last season, had the worst game I've seen him have. And Mitchell, who have never rated, was excellent. Absolutely excellent. Well done. Wharton had the best game I'd seen him have. And I've seen him have a few, and you've been raving about him, and I'd never seen him play well.
I don't know how serious his injury is, but he missed the England.
Yeah,
so.
But he played really well. But the other one is, I just think Mateta is more streamlined. I think he looks I think he looks an absolute beast this season, Arteta, and he's got everything. He's skillful. He's just got everything. I think he's a really good centre forward.
Well, he nearly lost something, because if Oliver Glasner had walked away, Oliver Glasner's made him the player that he is today. He wasn't a signing; he inherited him. So well done those. It was under the Roy Hodgson watch that they got him in. So credit there. But here's man, and that was the conundrum for Steve Parish. Sell your best defender, your club captain, and lose your manager, or take the risk with Marc Guehi being upset and keep the manager. And I think he, obviously, as I said, Guehi's a proper person, so he will have accepted it in a way that he maybe not accepted it, but he will deal with the disappointment in a way that will not impact negatively on Crystal Palace. That's absolutely sure.
Now Eze has gone, what will be a good season for Crystal Palace?
Probably a good run in the conference. I think that would be important. That would be a compensation for not being in the Europa League.
And a statement.
Yeah,
For a first year in Europe, it will be a
yes.
first time in Europe. It'll be a statement.
I think though they won't make so much money from it, but they might if they go all the way in it. And you obviously experienced that following Chelsea last season. And continuing to play the sort of football that has Selhurst Park rocking. It's one of the few grounds that's pretty much the same. Obviously limitations to what they can do to develop it, but it's a special place, and South London has been underrepresented, I think, in football over the years. Although they will claim that Arsenal started there, won't they? Which is technically correct. And yeah, the mid-table, continuing this long run well over a decade now that they've been in the Premier League. And we shouldn't underestimate what staying in the Premier League means. They've had one or two close scrapes, but not many. They've done enough. They've often got their points in with 7 or 8 games to go, and then tailed off a little bit when they could have probably pushed up to higher placing. So very good season last season. Eze was right at the core of that, no doubt about that. But
and the other player that I always want to give a shout about in 2025 is Chris Richards.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because, well, I mean, he was like always the first reserve, where it was Anderson and then Chalobah on loan, and when finally Chalobah was withdrawn and he had to play, he's come up trumps.
Well, they were going to keep the system because Igor Julio from Brighton was going to be the left side centre half in place of Guehi of the back three. So yeah, your man is going to stay in the team, that's for sure. And he has done extremely well. And in the big games, I mean, a tower of strength in those Wembley games, a tower of strength. So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of noise around Palace for the Europe reasons and for Eze going at the end. You saw his last game for Palace. Yeah. But they'll crack on, and they're not a threat, I don't think, for the higher echelons of it. But they're certainly, every team that plays Palace in the Premier League, from top to bottom, knows they're in a game.
Last team we have to talk about, we need to talk about Tottenham. 2 wins, including Manchester City away, then a home defeat, and then the departure of Chief Executive Chairman, everything, part owner, Daniel Levy. But not departing from part owning.
It looks like you lost 1-0 at home to Bournemouth, so you got the sack, and that's the sort of thing that happens to managers. Yeah. Well, it was a bolt from the blue. There's certain irony that the man who has dismissed a number of managers in his time there found himself in the position of being the victim this time. I think he's done amazing things for Tottenham. The fans will tell you that those things haven't led to the kind of football they want to watch. The kind of one thing about Tottenham we have to stress: they have won the league twice.
Only.
1951 and 1961. So not twice only, twice a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
So this, well, we have to compete for this and this and this. And they have competed, particularly under Poch.
Yeah.
And they were always, in my growing time through my career, have been known as a cup team, and a very good cup team. First English club to win a European trophy back in the early 1960s. They kept winning every time they got to the FA Cup final until they fell foul of Coventry, didn't they, in 1987? But and it is a bit of a surprise that they've only had these two trophies, both cup trophies, in the time that
League Cup,
the League Cup and the Europa League, yeah, in the time that Daniel Levy's been in the job. It is one of the pillars of the football community taken away, and I think you'll hear arguments on both sides. The stadium is sensational. I mean that. I don't mean just trite words. It's sensational. And I've said it a few times on this, but it's the sort of place you could book a week's holiday in and have a nice time.
Yeah. As long as you don't go out in the surrounding area. I've just got to ask a couple of things about Tottenham. Every time I see a list of money spent on salaries, Tottenham are up there. They're up there with Arsenal and Chelsea, and in fact, no, I think they're above Chelsea now, up there with Arsenal. So they're not scratching on salaries, but they seem to have a smaller overall budget than the other big six. And they seem to be, although you look at them as a big club, particularly if you're our age and saw them winning the double in 1961 and then having a wonderful 1960s. But they also seem a big club because they got into the Champions League a lot under Pochettino and under Harry Redknapp. But maybe they're not a big club. Maybe they're not a big club that's been overachieving when you look at the budgets that Daniel Levy has governed over and provided.
Well, these are the questions that are now obviously on the lips of every Tottenham fan. I've deliberately listened into some of the phone-ins to gauge what the mood is, and there's a lot of delight that now they think the shackles, those financial shackles, if they existed, will be lifted. And there are some people, perhaps you could say, that with less passion about the issue, saying, well, look how the club's been run, it's the stadium, the training ground is excellent. Yeah. And that, I think that there is so much competition, and that's where we get almost to that word that I hate using, entitlement, that the fans think it isn't winning the league they're going for, it's competing for the league. And obviously last season was disastrous in that respect, but they ended up with a trophy. And if you take finishing fifth in the Champions League place and getting it by that way and finishing and not getting anything in Europe, would we be having this conversation? I don't know. It was a back door into Europe, but it's there into the main competition. And as you say, they're no strangers to it.
I want to introduce something I haven't warned you about. I'm going to introduce something I haven't warned Martin about at all. I want just to name 3 or 4 clubs and say, when was the last time you went, wow, because of a signing? And I don't mean once you'd seen the signing, I mean who the signing was.
But I'm not a fan.
No, but because you want to see that team with that player. I mean,
no, I want to see that player in the Premier League.
All right, but I mean, for instance, the last time I did it, say with Manchester United, would have been Casemiro. I thought that was a great signing. Maybe it wasn't, but I mean, still in the team. The last time I did it with Liverpool was first this summer.
Did you see his free kick against Northern Ireland?
No, I haven't.
In the Szoboszlai category, so they'll be disputing over who's going to take the free kicks.
Yeah. I mean, Arsenal, I did it with Eze. Tottenham? Probably I did it with Maddison, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think Maddis was a very exciting signing for them. Actually, I like Richarlison as a forward player, so that was
I think it was a good buy, but it wasn't a wow factor buy for me.
no. If you're trying to judge Tottenham on that, Tottenham's playing style was always the attractive part of going to watch them and commentate on them.
I mean, when they bought Gascoigne, when they bought Lineker, when they bought Waddle, when they bought... I mean, this is all in a small period in the late 80s.
We need David Pleaton again, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, they were, when they bought Ardiaz, when they bought Ricky Villa, I mean, they have a history of buying sensationally and to make you think, I want to watch them.
More the style than the silverware.
Watch Tottenham,
is what you're saying. More style than silverware.
Yeah, although most of those players did win something, but yeah. But it stopped, is what I'm really saying.
Well, they've won the trophy, and they started the season well. They've got a brilliant manager, I think. Really to bring, and then they lose at home to Bournemouth, and then the world completely changes at Tottenham. The one thing I want to say, Neil, this is important. My first reaction was that they're going to sell out to the suitors from the Middle East that we know have been around North London for a while, and I thought this is a way to make it happen, and it will go through the descendants of Joe Lewis, the family of Joe Lewis, and it'll happen. They have made it quite clear that is not the reason. They're either, and I've no reason to doubt them, but there's always an option there for Tottenham to press the accelerator a bit harder and get more money in. Now, we'll see. For people who haven't run a football club before with the responsibility of Daniel Levy, it's a big ask, and I'm not in that be careful what you wish for camp, because it's an opportunity for somebody else, and that happens. That's happened in my profession and your profession, and it happens to everybody, and now it's happened to Daniel Levy. So I believe that decision will have come from the very top, from Joe Lewis. And why it happened now, maybe it will come out that it was always being set up for this time of year. It just seemed, had they beaten Bournemouth 3-0, would we be having this conversation? That's football. That's football.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's we need to talk about. And from there today, we're going on to, we need to talk about Europe, because we're about to embark on a new Champions League, Europa League and Conference League season. There are a record number of English clubs in the Champions League, 6. But Champions League success, coefficient success in UEFA hasn't come from the Champions League, it's come from the UEFA, from the Europa League and the Conference. In the last 2 seasons, only Arsenal last year have reached the semi-final of the Champions League. And let me just give you this quick rundown. From 2004-05 to 2022-23, in other words, from the season that Liverpool came back against Milan to win the Champions League to the season that Manchester City won it, England have had 6 Champions League triumphs, 2 from Liverpool, 2 from Chelsea, 1 each from Manchester United and Manchester City, and 9 runners-up, 3 for Liverpool, 2 for United, and 1 each for Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, and City. Spain have had 9 winners, 3 more winners, but only 2 clubs have won it. Less depth. Real Madrid 5, Barcelona 4, and only 2 runners-up. Atletico Madrid, both times. Real and Barcelona in that time haven't lost a final. We had a dry spell for Premier League clubs in the 20-teenies. From 2013 to 17, we had no Champions League finalists, and only Chelsea and City once each reached a semi-final. And in that time, there was only one other quarter-finalist apart from those 2, and that was Leicester. But we came back, and if you look at it, it's just been phenomenal. It's been phenomenal. 2018, Liverpool lost the final to Real Madrid. 2019, Liverpool beat Tottenham in the final. 2021, Chelsea beat Manchester City in the final. 22, Liverpool lost to Real Madrid. 23, Manchester City beat Inter Milan. English clubs have dominated until the last 2 years, when only Arsenal, once, who have never won it, have reached the semi-final. We won everything else last season. At the elite level, at the very elite level, we need to do better.
I can't believe you're saying this now. 15 finals, clubs in finals in 20 years, and we've had 2 years without it, with the highest level of competition. Goodness me, I mean, there's no crisis at all. The one thing that could happen, but Arsenal did get to the semi-final, is you now have to play more games to win the Champions League with the format. So is the fact that
not if you avoid the knockouts.
Well, you could have to play more games.
Sorry, not the playoffs. They're not called knockouts. The playoffs.
But there are potentially more games to win it. Therefore, in our busy season, it comes back to the old: do our players play too often? Our elite players play too often? I have no doubt that swamping the Champions League with half a dozen clubs this time, we're going to see some outstanding performances from Premier League teams. And Spain have got Real Madrid. I mean, that's the only one you can throw. I mean, they have somehow masterminded the way to win in this competition better than anybody else. And that goes back way back beyond this period we're talking about. So I don't see it as a problem at all. And the fact that we had 2 finalists in the Europa League, Chelsea absolutely walked the conference, as you know, because you've been telling me all the way through about it.
With the second choice 11.
With the second choice 11, yeah. So I'm not sure that that we should be looking at every season and saying, well, it wasn't quite as good as the last.
But we're not even semi-finalists at the moment.
Yeah, but these are, I mean, Villa should have knocked out PSG, won it. So, these are marginal calls, really. So I think it's a very exciting time for the fans of the Premier League teams that are in Europe. And there are a lot of them. It's going to be how the Premier League fixtures are going to be fitted in through all this autumnal stuff with lots and lots of games in the continental competitions as well. But it's terrific, and it shows again, we are at the top end of a very competitive industry, and there's no feeling of entitlement in English football, that you've got to go out and do it. And yeah, if we're having this conversation in a year's time, God willing, we're still doing this, then you might have a point. But at the moment, no worries at all.
I'm an atheist, and I've never said God willing in my life. I'm trying to get that around my brain. We move on to Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry.
Letter from the Gantry.
Neil, thank you. From the Gantry at the old Wembley Stadium, I saw the most extraordinary piece of goalkeeping, maybe in the entire history of international football. It was 30 years ago, and I'm grateful to the BBC sports journalist Alex Bysouth for pointing out to me the anniversary. England were playing Colombia in a friendly. Jamie Redknapp, then of Liverpool, was making his debut, was trying hard to mark the occasion with a goal. In truth, the shot he struck didn't really threaten, but maybe because of its lack of power, it empowered the visiting goalkeeper to take a massive risk and pull off an outrageous save. René Higuita had already acquired the name of El Loco, the madman, long before he arrived in England. This moment summed him up to perfection. Falling forward, he flicked both legs up behind him and volleyed the ball away, dubbed forevermore as the Scorpion save. I spotted it, but simply couldn't believe it. Surely I'd heard a whistle. The game must have been stopped. The flag had been raised, I believe. The England defender on the night, Steve Howie, who was marking his Newcastle clubmate Tino Asprilla, thought the same. But French referee Marc played on, and most of the crowd, only 20,000 that September evening, then started to applaud, recognising the unique nature of the incident. The eccentricity of it, the audacity of it, had me rubbing my eyes in disbelief. It was the stuff of comic strips and cartoons. Higuita was well ahead of his time. He loved to play from the back and venture out of his area, often well upfield. He actually scored 43 goals in his career. That game at Wembley finished 0-0. El Loco ended up with a clean sheet, surely one of his craziest. 30 years later, Premier League goalkeepers have fared pretty well in the opening 3 rounds of the season. There have already been 22 shutouts in the 30 scorelines. Only 3 clubs, Bournemouth, Brentford and Liverpool, have scored in all 3 of their games. The keepers have coped well with a new law, limiting the time they can have the ball in their hands to 8 seconds. Martin Dubravka, on his debut for Burnley, was caught out and conceded the different punishment now for such an offence, a corner to the opposition, in this case Tottenham, rather than an indirect free kick in the box. The referees are helping by waiting until the ball is fully controlled before starting their count, and by holding up a hand when they've reached the 5-second mark. The early signs are that the initiative has quickened up the game. What hasn't is the continued use of goalkeepers going down apparently injured to break up the play and allowing what has become a tactical timeout disguised as a drinks break. Of course, there are genuine injuries. When Manchester City were at home to Crystal Palace in April, the sight of Ederson sitting down stirred the cynical thoughts in many of us. The Brazilian, though, was genuinely hurt and was replaced by Stefan Ortega. But too often there is an ulterior motive. When an outfield player receives on-field treatment during a game, he has to go off for a minute, and that is a big deterrent against play acting. Obviously, a goalkeeper can't go off, which is why the mischief works. Why not amend the law so that when that happens, an outfield player serves that time off the field? Then we would see treatment only for real injuries to goalkeepers. As for the tactical timeout drinks break, why not take a leaf from cricket where the water bottles are taken onto the pitch? Then no one would have to refresh near the touchline. If players need to be given extra gen, direct from the coaches, every 10 minutes, neither party is doing their job properly. And that is often where the big helpings of added time come from. Maybe we should run this past René Higuita, who's just turned 59 incidentally. It is claimed that his outfield skills encouraged the authorities to change the back pass law back in 1992, a decision that has really benefited football. Not so loco after all.
Things have changed so much in the last 30 years. And what happens now is, if you're winning by a large margin and one of your players decides to showboat, it's considered bad taste.
Disrespectful.
Yeah. Not the opportunity to really display outrageous skills and entertain the paying fans. I love showboating.
I don't.
And I just look at what Higuita did, and I just wonder now, rather than everybody celebrating it as they did then, if he wouldn't get criticised.
Well, at the time, and I didn't give the save in my commentary the full merit of it, because I genuinely believed he couldn't have done it while the ball was legitimately in play. Thanks to Alex coming back to him and reminding me, I gave him a couple of quotes from my experience of the night for his piece on the BBC website, which is a very good piece, by the way. And it was just this sense of
disbelief.
Disbelief. But he foiled Jamie Redknapp, but he fooled the rest of us really, because that couldn't have been something that happened in regulation play, but it did. And of course in research, he had done it before, I think, but never in a game of such importance, playing for his country. But he is a crowd pleaser. He was a crowd pleaser. You had one, Barotta. He was very
1980s.
Yeah.
Can I just tell you a very quick story? Petar Barotta was a Yugoslav. It was Yugoslavia in those days. Goalkeeper who was an absolute nutcase, and he, by the way, which I'd never seen before, would, in 1980, would pick up the ball and drop it at the feet of his nearest defender to play from there. Mm-hmm. And when it was Ron Chopper Harris, he'd look at him and say, "What the are you doing?" and hump it upfield. But
he could give it back to him then, actually, or if he didn't.
Petar Barotta, in a preview of a game, was described in one of the London listing magazines, or Chelsea were described in one of the London listing magazines as Chelsea's back four are still trying to work out how to play behind Peter Barotta, because he kept appearing on the halfway line.
Yeah.
I mean, he was nuts.
He didn't do a scorpion kick though.
No, he didn't. And in the end, he got dropped for making too many errors through being outrageous. But he had outrageous ability as well.
Yeah. No, on just to wrap up the showboating, I'd rather my team, and in fact, you mentioned it kindly at the start, that Woking were 5-0 up. And I wanted them to score. The crowd were going, we want 6. They weren't going, let's do a bit of keepy uppies on the halfway line, you know? And that the opposition has to be respected, but the best way to, if you like, disrespect them is on the scoreline. And so having not had 5 for a long time, even when Alan Dowson was the manager and I was his assistant, I don't think we got 5 in a league game, certainly not in the National League. So I was happy with 5, but I joined in that we want 6.
Right, letter from the Gantry, which of course you can read in our Substack site, substack.com, under the Joy of Football, in which Martin's letters are appearing a little bit behind when they're coming on here. So you've got to keep listening to the podcast first of all, and my rants. And talking of rants, very quickly, Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
And we're going to keep this quick. I'm just revisiting things, Martin. After the transfer window, when there have been so many transfers this year, I said I did a rant earlier on in the year that I think there should be a cap on number of transfers because it's become a business and not a sporting decision-making progress. And I believe it even more after this summer.
Well, I think it'll still be a business, whatever restrictions you put on it. There are always restrictions. We've just talked about it, about the Europe squads and who you can play and who you can't. For me, I go in the opposite direction. Go back to the old transfer window. Why it is a restraint of trade if you can't be transferred.
Well, that brings me on to the next point.
So the old system was the third Thursday in March, so you could transfer all the time. And the only reason it was then was so that if you were in trouble, you couldn't go out in late March and early April to buy your way to survival or to success.
Well, again, with the transfer window, I've said that you should be allowed one transfer between each window as a football club, or maybe one in, one out between each window, because teams aren't balanced and clubs are getting picked off by richer clubs, and then you have the rights of players who aren't selected, who aren't in squads, the bomb squads. And there's 3 at my Chelsea. I think there's 1 at Manchester United. These people have got a right to play. And if they can't play at their club, then they should have a right to move. It doesn't mean they move for free, but they should have a right to move during the closed window.
Well, they could have gone to the club and said, will you pay up my contract and give me a free agency before the window finished?
Yeah, but the clubs won't pay up in full.
No. No, they certainly weren't in the case of one member of your bomb squad who's on over 300 grand a week.
No, they won't. But
if you don't have the window, you don't have this. The players could go.
Okay, so we're both on that. Get rid of the window. Financial fair play was the first kind of financial restrictions brought in by UEFA. And I always felt it was in response to Roman Abramovich buying Chelsea and spending so much money. But by the time that it was argued through and brought to the clubs, the first oil state, the UAE, had bought a football club, Manchester City. So when financial fair play was actually put up for vote, Chelsea voted for it because Abramovich knew he couldn't compete with the UAE. And in the same way, it seems to me that PSR, which of course is profitability and sustainability regulations, great term, Premier League, has been brought in not by the smaller clubs to survive, but by the bigger clubs to stop the smaller clubs who are getting more and more wealth from competing with them. It's a restriction which I'm not happy with.
No, and I agree with you on that totally, Neil. What I would say is some good news. The regulator is a bit of a hot topic, isn't it? But the first thing the regulator, I believe, is going to do is create better standards of qualification for ownership, so that genuine owners who've got a lot of money can come into a smaller club. And the ones that are maybe using it as opportunism will be at least checked on to the nth degree. What this is stopping is a club with great ambition and suddenly with proper wealth having a go and trying to get to the very top of the tree. You can't get to the very top of the tree.
And hitting those clubs above it and making it a bigger pool of rivalry.
The business in football, it is first and foremost a business. And once that happened, then nobody wants to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And football as it was, you were as good as your last game, basically. Now, because of these initials that keep being brought in, PSR and FFP, they are protected from that, and I don't think they should be. Any other business has to go through the market forces, and if your market force goes against you, if you're a top club, as happened in the past, we've had clubs that are nowhere to be seen now. You mentioned Huddersfield earlier. Huddersfield won 3 league titles in a row, but a long, long time ago, 100 years ago. But, these things happen and clubs do fall off the perch. And that's why we love it and make it competitive. We are blessed with the most competitive of the top leagues, but it could be more competitive as it used to be when we had Liverpool did win a lot of leagues, but we had Southampton and Watford and Ipswich, teams like that finishing second. And now, you only have to look at the last 20 years to see it's a very restricted number of clubs that do anything special. So I would get rid of it. I would as long as you control the sustainability is the part of it that I do respect, because if somebody comes in and throws a ton of money at it and then decides to go away again, then that club falls. But would you rather have a club that gets 10 years in the Premier League and then ends up in League Two? Would you rather have had those 10 years? I don't know. I think Oldham are very proud that they've just got back in the Football League via a playoff at Wembley. They were a Premier League team, and that sits really nicely on their record. I don't think anyone's going to go, I wish that hadn't happened. I wish we'd been maybe more steady through it.
I'm going to throw one more at you, which isn't on our schedule. This weekend, injuries to Dembele out for 6 weeks and Doue out for 4 weeks. 2 PSG players who went all the way through the Club World Cup to the final. Muscle injuries, I think hamstring with Dembele, calf with Doue.
Didn't Doue replace Dembele actually in the game? I think he might have done, it's a worry. Neil, it would be silly to say it's not a worry. Obviously they played a lot of football. Muscle injuries are the cost of it. And those who are much more skilled than you and I at monitoring why this has happened. There are other reasons for injuries that are not to do with the fact that you've played a lot of games, but soft tissue injuries are usually overloading. And two fine players who'll be out for a few weeks, and we'll on this program at least we'll keep an eye on how that pans out.
And I just want to finish today, stoppage time. I want to finish with one question. 3 consecutive titles for Huddersfield 100 years ago. Were you commentating?
Ha 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 ha. I was just learning my trade then.
From Martin and me.
See you.
Right. That's it. We're looking forward to another weekend of football. Martin, what's the moment for you so far this season? Now it's getting its identity that you've most jumped out of your seat.
From the Gantry, Josh King's disallowed goal for Fulham against Chelsea. Outrageous.
Oh.